Do you recall, if you care to recall, from several tapings ago, we noted that all known positions from which someone could think, that all known positions are simplistic. Now you all remember that if you were listening. We were talking about many other things, but it was around that same focal point, and I finally summed it up in that ordinary thought must have some known position. But I pointed out that all known positions are simplistic, so let us carry on with that. That being our absolutely unstated and unstable premise, to carry it on, then add this. The better known the position is, the more simplistic it is. There is no end to this, by the way, because since everything is inconclusive, no matter if the position seems to expand to such a degree that it almost becomes a new position. This keeps expanding, the reality of this keeps expanding along with whatever is in the midst of it. And that should be plain enough, right? If the body of life swells up, puts on 50 pounds, the liver will keep up. I know that not necessarily this happens materially, but the liver will swell up to take care of a swelled up person. I don't know whether anybody should bother to write that one down, but well, see, I was looking off deciding, do I even want to remember that one? Do I even want to admit that I said that? What I was getting to very specifically is this. That a known position is a simplistic position. The better known the position, the more simplistic. Thusly, you lead right into the ever popular "I knew that already" syndrome. "I knew that already" is the excellent example of the necessarily inconclusive masquerading as a quite confident first story. But in the "I knew that already," the first story, instead of looking at it from what appeared to be an inside view looking out, when we've covered the unrecognized dynamic of life, always offering up a first story for anything that is happening, and that people are inclined to take the first story no matter how unsatisfying, because on the surface, as far as ordinary thought goes, the first story will serve its purpose. If it begins to not serve its purpose, then it ends up in the billfold of dinosaurs somewhere. The first story, though, you can look at now, I invite you to, is not being just that which life apparently presents to explain, to send in energy to make people go, "Oh," and to walk away from it. That is, to not think anymore, to not think any more than they have to, and ordinarily, as far as they have to think, is just enough to take in the first story. But you can look at the first story as being also a phenomenon within your own nervous system. And that can be reflected in several ways, and the example I was using tonight is the ever popular, never goes out of style, is always, at least in everyone's top 10 favorites in their arsenal of thoughts, is "I knew that already," is a form of your own personal, individual first story. It is, as always, the necessarily inconclusive, in the same way that a first story is actually inconclusive. All you've got to do, no matter what the first story is in life, all you've got to do is use the kind of method we've been talking about, as simple as it sounds, but being able to think more than you have to. To do that, from no known position, of course, but to think more than you have to, then no first story on earth is satisfactory. Not just from some hardwired cynical view, because we can pick out any first story that if you live a religious life, the gods will reward you after you die. Within life's body, it is also wired up to have critics, cynics, philosophers, and other either with or without portfolios, smartasses, to go, oh no, oh no. We're not talking about that though. We're talking about in general, the middle of the bell curve, the main trunk of life's body, man's body in life, accepts whatever the prevailing first stories are. And so I'm not saying that somebody that just sits around here and there and says, well, all religions are a farce and they're all a scam and you can't trust priests. None of that. It would be from no known position, not an attack, to use this example, on any religion. It's just simply that if you think more than you have to, that is, there is a balance between what people think, as it's called. That is, their neural activity that seems to be triggered by some activity. In this case, a first story. That there you are crying because someone died, and a priest, your mother, your brother comes up, a rabbi, and says, well, he lived a good life, and therefore the gods, I'm sure, will give him some reward, etc. To think as far as you should, just a general, middle of the road, middle class, middle of the bell curve person, the first story is generally arranged and tied to your own wiring system so that people take the first story at least there at that time and go, well, you know, I guess you're right. Or I'm still heartbroken, but yes, that's true. So it's not a form of cynicism, and it's not naysaying. It's not a mechanical negative reaction to go, oh, no, it's not true, because that is from a known position. To see beyond the first story is to see that first stories on an individual level, from that kind of view, are still a matter of this verbal inconclusiveness. It seems to serve a purpose at the time of, oh, I knew that already. If something apparently happens out here, and maybe someone attempts to explain it, and you either overtly or to yourself, you say, oh, I knew that already. You have given yourself, as it were, a first story. But it is a masquerade, it is a literal sham if you think any more than you have to, because you did not know that already. In fact, whatever it is, you don't know. Whatever it is. If someone says, well, let's say that you've been mistreated, or someone brings you the news that you have been mistreated, cheated by someone, and you go, what? And they say, well, after you get over throwing your conniption fit, they say, well, remember this. Everybody gets their just due. Everybody, all ill deeds will be repaid. And to yourself, you might not use the words, but you go, I knew that already. But you did not know that already because you don't know it now. It is an inconclusive, but to a degree, a satisfactory story. Assuming that you don't see any way immediately to seek revenge. Perhaps you're just wired up to not try and seek revenge, or you're frightened of the person who you have learned has cheated you. And so you accept the first story of yourself, and they say, well, the law will catch up with everyone. If they don't, judgment day will get them. And you go, yeah, I knew that. That is, I'm going to take that story. I am wired up, I am primed to do no more than that. So you do not think any further than that. But there is no reality, there is no more complex reality to, I knew that already. But it is carrying on past the point I told you to begin to see that all known positions are not only simplistic, but the better known they are. It is the power, if this is still acting too vague, it is the power of so-called cliches. It is the power of the general information floating around that's known as conventional wisdom. It may be known as self-evident truth. It may fall in the apparent category or purview of some specialized area, like these are religious or Christian or Jewish or Islamic revealed truths. But if they're going to have any particular effect at that time on the hearer, there is some degree of first story phenomenon involved, and internally it comes out like, oh, I knew that already. Because if you didn't know that already, then you couldn't hear it. There would be nothing. There'd be no conduit for the energy to pass of the first story to you. It would be another language. It would be absolutely, literally, inconceivable, whatever it was said, which would be a form of energy. It was that you could not handle the energy. So whether it is put in the words or not, people's nervous system, the way it is processing information, energy, is continually saying to itself, in essence, I knew that already. I knew that already. I knew that already. And it is not an attack on humanity. It is not a sign of ignorance, because it could easily be a sign of intelligence. I could twist it around if you think that's an attack. Ordinary people could not function were it not for this phenomenon of the first story continually floating around. And then internally, their kind of processing of it on an individual level of, oh, I knew that already. I knew that already. Yeah, I knew that already. It is almost like an inconclusive stopgap measure of, I knew that. Yeah. It's almost as though, if you can follow this, not just the words, but the kind of energy behind it, that if people were not doing that, to twist reality, if everything stayed as it is other than what I'm describing, that we suddenly had a serious lack of I knew that already, then people would begin to crack. People's neural system and patterns would begin to disintegrate. I think it's normally known as going Daffy Duck, going Woody Woodpecker time. There has to be this kind of stabilizing energy that is running along. As it were, it's almost a subcarrier of the kind of energy, which appears to be verbal information coming in, of this kind of running along on a parallel track of you continually saying, well, yeah, I knew that already. I knew that already. It is a form of sanity. It is a form of sequential sanity, at least. But it is not necessary for you to know something already to ever learn anything else. May I say, in conclusion of this paragraph, contraire. For those of you that don't speak Albanian, look it up later. Well, you should note before I absolutely leave this paragraph that having this necessary inconclusiveness, which is first story, which is I knew that already, is another way, another mapping of the way in which life continues to keep man's intelligence ever alert, dull, expectant, and of course complacent. And it can do it almost with a whatever magicians do on the stage. And it's all done in a kind of legerdemain that requires very little distraction. Although sometimes I give this physical theatrics to it of how magicians do of, well, nothing up my sleeve, and you see this is a plain bicycle-backed ace of spades, and you look over there, and of course over here he's doing something like trying to figure out what might be the true home of the sixth subparticle. But at any rate, you're looking over here while he's doing something else. Oh, all right, he's palming another card, if you want to. Didn't know how to be that crude. But that kind of misdirection is not even necessary in life, as I have been trying to hint for the last few nights. What if all talk, not anything specific, but all talk is a form of misdirection? In that the primary purpose may be something altogether different than whatever's being said. Did you say whatever's being said? Yes, I said whatever's being said. It doesn't matter. It matters at this view. But if you had this view, you might see, well, that doesn't really matter because what's going on is still going on, no matter what's said. So the legerdemain, it is not a matter of life having to go to some great extreme as a stage magician, if I didn't make, for the guy to have to go. Those of you that hadn't seen, or all of you seen magicians, and they'll sometimes do things that appears to be directly part of the act, or the trick they're about to do. That the guy holds up and he says, all right, this is a plain ace of spades. And so you assume he's going to do something with the card, right? And a magician will do things like, he'll pull a sleeve to show, like, he didn't have to tell you, you're supposed to be hip enough that he's showing, well, I'm going to pull up my French cuff, or I'm going to undo my, to notice there's nothing there, and he'll turn his hand, and so you look like, well, he is going to great pains to show me that he only has this card. There's not no one hidden back here or stuck in his sleeve. And so he's doing all that. But over here, he's doing whatever the gaff is, whatever the trick he's doing over here, getting it ready while you're looking here. All right, that is plenty old and plenty efficient. It's just super efficient. Even after somebody tells you that. A magician could pop up here on stage, and if you think you're real hip, he might say, well, I heard that explanation, but I'm gonna do it with my left hand. And him do it this way, and you go... Well, just as life intended, your senses, your electromagnetic fed senses are just as hip as they should be. And that's how hip they are. That the guy says, well, I guess he caught me do it with this hand, but I'll do it with this hand. You go, yeah, wait, no. I didn't just fall off the bus here. I've been around. Life does not have to go that extreme is what I was getting at. Life does not have to say in words to man like, well, all right, let's talk about very serious matters about what might be the individual purpose of you being of one sex or the other. I'm just making that up. And you go, all right. And while it's doing that, it says, all right, now I want you to listen because it has spiritual significance. And you go, all right. It's not necessary that life do that so that verbally in some other way it can pick your pocket, neurally speaking. That is, it can send in some other spurious, surprising, unexpected information. Life does not have to go that far. Life can have men say anything, so I'm suggesting to you, and it's already misdirection. It doesn't matter what it is, that it's already misdirection, if indeed is my suggestion. Hence, that the primary purpose is not in what is being said. The basic purpose, the underlying purpose, it is simply in preparation for even additional information. And so the ledger domain is not in what's said. Life does not have to say, like scaring you, let's say, and life had to say, hey, let's talk about death. And you go, ooh. And then it tries to slip in, like, one way out of death is to join the church, the one I'm supporting now, and contribute money and help them out. See, while life got your attention about, you're going to die and rot and the worms are going to eat you. And you go, oh! And it says, yeah. See, it doesn't have to go that far. Whatever it's trying to do, it could say, have you ever considered when you move to just rent a truck and do it yourself? It serves the same purpose of saying, do you know you're going to die? It doesn't matter. Maybe. What it is doing is it continues to keep man's intellect in the necessary state. I'll say it for the final time and wrap up this paragraph. This about covers it, but it continues to keep man's intellect ever dull and alert, ever expectant and complacent. That's all that's necessary. Some more, although it's a new paragraph, concerning my non-specified, as of yet, new creation story, myth, tied to still the possibility of words simply being at their basic level, their primary purpose being in preparation for the future, as opposed to a more narrow, three-dimensional view that these words within themselves are serving a conclusive purpose. They are serving a purpose per se. They are serving the words themselves, are representing some reality that right there, in this particular situation, the reality itself is of intrinsic significance. And that's what the words are representing. As opposed to that, what I'm suggesting of words being primarily involved with preparation. That was all the introduction to this paragraph. Consider all the old myths, the myths that are now taken as being otherwise. All of the old myths, all the old, especially pointed toward the creation myths, after they tell a few stories, they've now become solidified and taken as being either truth or ritualistic truth or allegorical truth. Very shortly, they not only speak of creation, they have to speak of the creation. They have to speak about the final day of reckoning, that which is created by the gods, if you're thinking, as you should be in the old system, of sequential thought of the gods, and in some way we have sprang from them, we were created by them. We are their underlings, we are their experiment, etc. But if they created us, then in some way there's got to come a day when we are discreated. the judgment day, the day of destruction, the ultimate fate. But I want you to consider and note that all of the myths, now basically contained in religions, of course, but all of the day of judgment has to do with punishment. I mean, talk about short shift, paradise, heaven, and all the world's religions and Vedamikams. Any time that paradise and reward is mentioned, there's got to be that number by the order of 10 at least having to do with punishment. Everybody knows that. But note what I want you to see on the decreation side of all the myths, on the level of punishment. The punishment is always the same thing, the way I'm going to suggest it to you. The punishment is always this, that the people are getting through eternity what they thought they wanted in mortal life. That is, people are getting universally what they thought they wanted locally. That is, people are getting temporally what they thought they wanted spatially. All right? People forever churning in this burning lake of greed, envy, hostility, lust, gluttony. Now, of course, I'm using now putting a kind of negative spin, but gluttony is, well, gluttony, looked at another way, gluttony is not all one of the 7 deadly sins. You can make gluttony, all you got to do is call it gourmeting. Lust, you can go if you were some down-home rabbi or preacher and talk about lust, but you can say affection. Greed, wanting the better things for your family. It always helps to say that instead of yourself, but you can even make it fly to, I would like some of the nicer, bountiful gifts that the gods have made available. So I do not mean it that this is some sort of moralistic attack, but what I wanted you to see was that it turns out, of course, in the religions it does come out as being a moralistic judgment that the people are being punished and that you will be punished for these sins, for these great missteps of being vengeful in life. But consider it. What they are saying, what is being denoted by life through man, without any kind of analyzation, without people thinking past the point that they need to think, is all it's describing is the very things that people think they want in life. In 70 years. Locally, that is you, that is here on this planet, in this life, is what you want, but then punishment. As I said, they're inclined to change the name a little, but it's the same. The punishment is that you're going to get this, it's going to happen, except it's going to be for goddamned ever. Think about it, if you can. It is, I suggest to you further, it is a representation of what it might be like if indeed one of the 3 dimensions, one of the 3 forces, indeed was able, in an uncontested, unchecked, unrestrained manner, to establish its plan, to execute the paradigm it was given, the charge it was given by life. Like one of the mafia families out of 3 is you go and you set up the world's best shylocking business. And that sends out with the other 2 dimensions. Remember, you've got always the height, breadth, and the Colombo family. As you get out there and you set out the world's greatest loan sharking. I'm suggesting, if you can hear this, they're also, in a sense, picturing, life is describing down at a cruder, more brittle level, punishment. That is, of people getting through eternity what they thought they wanted in life, is also another way of looking at what if one of the forces, that one thing, that at times you wanted revenge in life. And it doesn't matter that religions here and there or humanistic philosophy can say, well, you shouldn't want revenge. Everybody has wanted revenge. And when you really want revenge, it oft times seems sweet. Not getting revenge, because that can just mess up the whole deal to get what you thought was revenge, but the desire for it, which is, forget sweet as being some kind of psychological manifestation or dynamic, the energy that has happened when you have been mistreated. And then the energy to want to return the mistreatment, as you should, at that level. At your religion, your forefathers' religion, may condemn it, but at the time that you react in that way, it is a pleasurable transfer of energy. So imagine what you would do to that son of a bitch. To just suddenly imagine that, I mean, as bad and surprisingly as egregious as he treated you, you can suddenly think of, just immediately, one thing you could do to him that he'd be sorry he ever heard of you. And you may never do it. It may be gone within a second. But then there is no self-condemnation of it. But notice, all religions say there will be people throughout eternity bobbing up and down in this never-ceasing lake of fire. But in this guy's particular case, it will be a lake of fire, and the fuel will be vengeance. He'll have eternity. Like the fire will constantly remind him. Like thousands of little tops of these little flames will be little voices saying, vengeance, vengeance, vengeance. And so there you are, bobbing up and down, never drowning, never dying, burning. And all of your life you're reminded the reason you're here, bastard, sucker, is because you wanted vengeance in life. All right? And so now, forever and ever, you're burning and you won't die and you can't get over it. And it's vengeance, vengeance, vengeance. And you think, Jesus, boy, I wish I'd never heard of vengeance. I wish I'd never thought about it. But notice, you are now getting, according to them, you're now getting universally what you thought you wanted locally. You're now getting through eternity what you thought you wanted momentarily or in life, in ordinary life. But can you see that that is indeed another way that if you wanted vengeance, nobody actually gets vengeance? I mean, it's impossible mathematically, but that's another story. But what if you could single-mindedly, in the literal sense of that, seek revenge? That would be one dimension getting its way. It would be a real revolutionary act. It would be outside the mainstream of life because you would have to get revenge, and that'd be the end of it. That is, let's say that you thought, well, that guy's insulted me the last time, I'll just kill him. So you go over and kill him. But to do this, in the way of revenge actually taking place in life, you'd have to be able to go kill him. And as soon as let's say you shot him right here and you realize, well, no, he's just a day's news. Is then you walk away and you never thought about it again. Never, ever, unconditionally, never, 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 never. That does not happen in life. If it does happen in life to ordinary people, they are properly deemed to be psychotic, a danger to life, and they're put away or shot themselves. So if it does happen, and I'm not even going to argue with you, well, I'll admit to you, it almost happens in life, but that kind of stuff at that level is mutant behavior. Life does not tolerate it. What I'm saying is if someone purposefully was trying to do it and knew how, and decided, well, I want revenge. The only real revenge to something is to destroy the person. Just kill them. Anything else is you're just fooling around. But you would have to be able to go and kill the person, just on the spot, kill them, and walk away and never think about it. That nothing could make you think about it. I mean, if somebody said, did you kill so-and-so? You'd have to know how to hear that, and maybe for some reason you respond and say, yeah, but you wouldn't think about it. You would do the deed and that would be the end of it. But that is not the way the energy flows in life. That is self-defeating. That is a form of suicide in life. That is why it's not possible for people to do it. And if ordinary people do it, they are deemed to be a danger. They are identified as being mutant, and they are destroyed themselves. That would be what would happen, what I was getting at. It would be a kind of physical manifestation, if you can follow this right quick, of one force, one dimension getting its way. That the battle between the three forces, the three dimensions of creation giving birth via triplets. And each of the forces has its own paradigm of how life should operate, of what structures it should be building. And its picture, its genetic picture, is the only correct one. And so it must establish its own, strive to, while simultaneously striving to resist, if not destroy, these other two sets of plans that untoward, dumb, evil, ill-intended people keep trying to set up on their own. If one of the forces over some long range could actually do away with the other two, could actually establish its plan, what I'm suggesting to you, you would have what old intelligence thinks of as being punishment. That is hell, some kind of worse world than this one after you die. But all they would be describing is if indeed one of the forces could get its way. And don't say, well, wait a minute, one of the bad forces, because you're back to old intelligence. You're saying that punishment then would be if the bad forces took over. It could be what you call one of the good forces, which of course is what you're wired up to think would lead to paradise, to reward. If that thing took over, don't let that get, that's not that hard to see. Let's take Christianity, best known. Let's say that that is the living example in the ordinary world of good force, all right? If Christianity could take over and do away with all opposition, do you really think that'd be good for us? And don't play around with man's psychology. It's way beyond all that. Although I could explain it to that level, that if Christianity at a very crude level, or any religion, actually took over and became a one-party religion, the whole world, such as if it's politics, if it became a one-party state politically, surely all of you can realize the way human nature has gone until now, that you'd be in for a bad time. That if one guy, one party, one tribe, one nation, one religion, one race, one little group, one family somewhere could actually steamroller over all opposition. And let's say that in the beginning you thought, you and many other people thought, well, hey, that is the best force going. That's my political party, that's my religion, or that's my family, that's my nation, that's my tribe, those guys knows what they're doing. Boy, I hope they can take over. You realize if they took over, you sure would regret it. The whole world would regret it because that would be the end of this planet, among other things. One force of any nature cannot come to some conclusive takeover. But what I'm trying to get you to see is, without them knowing it, humanity is wired up so that the myths that were once alive now turned into religions, that the very thing that they're dreaming of as being hells, infernos, eternal punishment, is exactly what they're, without knowing it, that they're thinking would happen even if their paradigm, their genetic view of what would be good, if that could indeed be executed singularly. If all opposition could be eradicated and their good view, their good force take over, what they'd have is not paradise, they'd have what they dream of as being Dante's Folly. Well, was that a pregnant enough pause? Well, I don't guess there's any need trying to strangle people with it. Let me give you some more aspects of that kind of creation stories and these myths. All of the old religions have some version of a couple more things that I will pull out for you if we got enough time. One of them is that all the religions have their God saying something to this effect: that I am always with you. As though that is some sort of optional benefit that he might bestow. But he is saying, assuming the God's a he, which all the good old ones of course were, which is the way God intended it to be. Well, as he says, I am with thee. Thee, I think they say instead of you, don't they? I am with thee. Does anybody know why all gods in the Western world speak in Old English instead of like everyday folk? At any rate, they all have their God saying, I am with you, or thee. But it is done on the basis, people do not particularly analyze it this way, but they realize, those who are followers of that religion, who are wired up, that that's part of their existence, that, yes, our God is with us. But it's done, it's accepted as being, that what's said is an option. You know, the gods could have said, you know, I created you people, and I was with you for a while, but, you know, you become very irritating, so And of course, in most of the religions, there is these kind of little ups and downs. It's no different than a Hollywood movie. That the plots are always boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy gets girl back. That's just a variation of the gods say, "I'm with you guys, you're my people," and then the God goes, "You're annoying, I'm gonna leave." And then later, through some kind of great supplications and sacrifices, he says, "Oh, all right." And so it's like people meet God. People lose the God, people get God back. It's that kind of story. Well, that's what I was... Along those lines is why I was trying to get you to see that it has a very specific purpose. It is not some... I'm not bringing it up, as you should know, to cause some laughter, to be cynical. It is serving a purpose, but all of the religions have their gods. That is somewhere in a focal point. It's just almost past the point of them talking about it to a great extent, that if you are a follower of whatever it is, of Hinduism or Billism or Judaism or Islam, somewhere in there the God says, I am with you. I mean, that is just it's just one of the main entrances to the religion. You have got to know. Surely he has said that one time, and you've got to believe. You've got to think that, well, this God is with us, or why else would you be pursuing the religion? That I am with you. We still hadn't got to where this paragraph was really going, believe it or not. This is all still the opening sentence. But notice the way it's phrased. And just trust me, and even after it's been translated from other religions, in all of the religions, all of the myths, the God somewhere tells the people, I am with you. And even if it's not overtly and specifically put, you grew up, most of you, in some religion, and so your nervous system responds to some to hear I am with you, and you respond on the basis of, God, that's good to know. There's not some God that you read about or you grew up that you heard that there is a God, and we got almost definite proof. But he lives way out somewhere, and he's never really said anything to us, and our forefathers tried to send him messages and tried to wire him and write him and tried to get over there. It's just like he treated us like we didn't exist. Now the God says, obviously he's acknowledging you. I am with you. And it feels good. As opposed to him saying, well, no, I'm tired of you guys. I'm going to pick up some new people. Or you've made me mad. In other words, I am not with you. This is the alternative. So it is taken without any analyzation that this is an option. That our God could be with us, or he could not. He could get mad, or for whatever reason, do away with us, or at least split from us. But it's not an option. Why does it feel good? It's not an option. The older, simpler, now you should have the correct term, gene-gods are always with you. They got no choice. I mean, the idea that I am with thee. Like what choice have they got? But you have got to begin to follow any of this besides just getting that kind of almost reflex neural laughter that some of this gets. You've got to be able to think in such a way that time is not running sequential in any manner. And it's not just running parallelly. You've got to understand that you can blow up a balloon, and right there, what appears to be the same time that you're blowing up the balloon, it's expanding, that different parts, different points on that balloon surface can be aging differently simultaneously. The gods, the gene gods, are always with you. And it doesn't matter whether you want them to be, and it doesn't matter whether you call them gods or not. The older genes are there, and for it to come out in what appears to be a sequential way, that at one time, these superior myths, these superior beings, that is the gods, said, I am with thee. They said that to my line, to my genetic line, to my racial line, to my religious line, but it's a genetic stream that you're in, that my God, my forefathers' God, back when they had gods that were real gods, said, I am with thee. It was not an option. And it was not something that was said back then. It is something that is being said now. Because there is no choice. Your genes are always telling you, yeah, we're here. Where else are they going to be? What did you expect them to say? Unless you got insane genes. Are they going to say, hey, this is not us talking to you? And that you're dumb enough to go, well, good. That settles that. In my foolish hope, I just hope that there's no one actually seeing these tapes or taking them seriously that is at that level of intelligence, because I know how simple I must look to somebody like that. There's a way in which, if you heard any of that, that someone attempting to do this sort of stuff should sort of ask themselves from no known position if it's really to your personal benefit to be carrying around your poorer, dumber relatives forever in your back seat of the car. All right, at the ordinary level, the kind of wired up comfort of your gene guide speaking of, I am with thee. Are you sure that's a personal benefit to be dragging those people around forever? Once you begin to see that they are certainly more simplistic. I was trying to give you a slightly new way to catch a glimpse. I called them, since I was using allegory of relatives, they're dumber, they're poorer, they're always hitching rides, they're in the back seat. Of what benefit is it to have to drive them around forever? Are you sure that that's a great benefit, even though they seem to say, I am with thee? Again, like there was an option. If you're ordinary, there is no option. There they are. And they can say, I am with thee. And if you're the sort to be just an ordinary thee, I guess you can go, well, that's some comfort. That is, if you'll take those kind of first stories. That is, if you'll say, well, I knew that already. No. Our gods are with us. Your genes are with you. Under ordinary conditions, you cannot have a three-dimensional car without some kind of back seat. And don't tell me that you got a two-seater. You have got a back seat. If a man was really revolutionary in intent, or if he could be, if there was such a thing as revolutionarily religious, are you sure that even then somebody won't be dragging around the gods with you all the time? Because they're still going to be older than you are. They're still going to be more simplistic than you are. Put it to you another way. Are you sure you want to drag around the past forever? Because that's what you're dragging around. That's what you're listening to. All right, I'll give you another piece of a myth. The old ones. Not completely unrelated. They're in all other religions also. You have got the religions having their gods say, or the religions say, that the gods, or their God, created man in the God's image. All of them say that. Trust me if you don't know it. They all say it. Myths that kind of got waylaid and never became widespread religions, even they say it. As the gods created man, of course, but they created man, big surprise, in their own image. And everybody just nods, and you can see people even today go, this is really sort of a side trip, but I would have to ask you, nobody thinks this way because you're not supposed to, but what was the option? Now don't get too smart and say, well, they could have done it some other way. Maybe, but you can't think about it. Try it. I got a second. You can try as hard as you want to. Now you can say something silly like, well, you could have made us look like an elephant. Yeah, but then if you're an elephant, you would have believed that God looks like an elephant. There is no way the ordinary intellect can conceive of any alternative to say, our God, and the inference being like was such a nice guy, or he felt so warm toward us that, in fact, I think in the Old Testament, they, by some interpretations or translations, the gods even, or God says something like to the minor gods or the angels like, well, let's create man And they all went, yeah, what's a man? He went, well, a thing, but I tell you what, let's do it in our image. And I think they all went, wow, what a concept. Your brain cannot think of any alternative rather than just accepting, as you are normally wired up to be if you were brought up in any kind of religion, that in some way is comforting. That as crude and as ill-kept as I may be at times, at least, I know I'm created in God's image. Try and think of an alternative. Back to the main road. The idea of being created in God's image, I could also say, is another version of, hey, put the obvious on us again. Because from a more complex reality, you could, withal, see the gods as being in this kind of position. That is, your genes, your older genes. Is that rather than it being in the sequence of the gods created us in their image, the God genes in you and anybody, perforce, must take on the image of whatever organism they're constructing. Oh, come on. It's not just vice versa. But if that's the best, so I get you started, try and reverse it. It doesn't really fit even verbally to reverse it. It's not that men necessarily created the gods in their image. That's somebody, I think, several thousand years ago. Life let somebody mouth that one. And it's not that, all right, the gods created themselves in man's image. No. All right, the gods created man in man's image. No. Consider the gods being the older genes. That it can be said, which it has been said, that the gods, the gene gods, created man in their own image. Okay. But the gods being genes, can you also see from a kind of in a more complex reality, it could also be noted that such gene gods also perforce of three-dimensional reality, which is all we're talking about right now for the example. They must take on the image of whatever it is that they're creating. I'm going to say I hate to be crude and then go ahead and be crude as I always do when I say I don't want to be crude. All right. The gene gods in a possum. Now, three-dimensionally, you may not have the facility to see it, but the gene gods in a possum sure do look marsupially. That is, if you could see them, they each and every one strongly resemble possums. And those gene gods in elephants have a certain pachydermium aura to them. What else could it be? If you had orangutan genes in you, I would suggest that you would not look exactly like you do. Don't go into any individual cases, I don't guess. The thing that God's created man in His image. For you people on tape, I do not bring this up as any sort of, in any way, an attack on religion. Of any religion, any beliefs. But this has a widespread genetic effect. It is a transfer of energy that people, all throughout the life of this planet, the intellectual life of man, that this has a significance. It has a specific effect of people hearing that, people who are not actively religious. But they would, anybody in the mainstream of life's body, anybody middle-classly sane in this life, even if they say, well, I'm not even sure I believe in a God, I could be an agnostic. But I could still get into you saying, all right, if there is a God, He created us in their image. And the reason they can say, yeah, I could sort of go along with that, the reason is they cannot conceive otherwise. No one can. If they say, well, I'm not even sure there's a God. And you say, okay. But they then might say, well, but if there is, just for the sake of theory, if there is, then I'll go along with He created man in His image. And you can say, well, now, you're pretty intelligent. And since you're not fanatically religious or religious at all, then maybe you could think, how could it be otherwise? Can you conceive of... And the person would, if they were doing this, they would have to say, well, no. If there is a God, I mean, that's got to be the basis of it. He created us some way, maybe not the same size, and we might not pass off as his twin brother, but we got to be some kind of reflection of him. Try vice versa. And then try and find an alternative compromise, or a compromise alternative if you get good. It's not simply reversed, but the reverse would be, perforce, as inescapable as the other one is in theory, that is, that God may have created us in his image. That may be. But if you just simply reverse it, there is no longer any maybe. The cells, the genetic code of a human has got to be human. After that, you may go into, well, the gods may have created us in their image. The genes may have created us in their image. That may be true. Even at the immediate level, the reverse of it is no longer any may be true. It's inescapable. But the significance is not some dismantling of religion. It has to do with the way in which you think, the way in which you can use this yourself. People believe that the past is talking. People believe that a superior past is talking. Or if they believe it's the present talking, they think it's superior. If someone listens to their own nervous system churning about, and if they say, well, I'm not necessarily believing in what my forefathers said that some God said or some spirit said 2,000 years ago on the other side of the world, what I can hear talking to me now is my own conscience. What I can hear talking to me now is the proper kind of directions and words that tells me what to do. Whatever it is telling them what to do, what kind of syndrome that I have mentioned tonight, since we'll play test time, would be involved. All right, don't tell me, let me guess. I knew that already. Right. It is a more simplistic position. It is an older position. If you knew it already, you don't have to necessarily ascribe it to the gods. Remember, I'm saying that they're going to be in the back seat. The gods don't have to say, I am with thee always. Give me a break. Where else are you going to go? If your genes, if your God did decide, well, I know I said I'm going to be with you always, but I changed my mind, I'm leaving, then I hope that your burial insurance is paid up, because at the very least, or at the very most, your visceral existence, your guts and everything's fixing to go, I don't know exactly where, but it's fixing to open up and go. Your genes are leaving you. The genes are always with you. The voices are always with you, and it's always from a known position. And everything they say is involved, whether you put it specifically to yourself or not, is involved with the dynamic of, oh, I knew that already. They will never go away. And they're not supposed to at the ordinary level. But are you sure that that's to your personal benefit? Are you sure you want to drag this around forever? And you don't have to call it God's. Voice of reason, my own intelligence, or maybe better yet, my own education, what I have been taught, what I know to be true. I don't have to worry about some religious myth. I am educated. I am sophisticated. I have some ability to reason, to perceive, to think, to ponder, to meditate. But if they could think more than they have to, and you said, do you ever think of anything new? Well, sometimes. Are you sure it's new? I mean, when you think about it, does this sound familiar? When you think about it and you think, oh, a new thought. Or you read something, I didn't know that. If they could think more than they had to, and if I said, does this sound familiar? I knew that already. Ordinary people, if they were unordinary while still being in their same position, would go, oh my God, pardon me, oh my God. You're right. Even stuff that I learn anew, I knew that already. as happens in this life, since we're not dealing with eternity. Unless, of course, you're out in the waiting room just prior to serious root canal work. Since we're not dealing with eternity, as happens on a local level, we have run out of either time or tape. I never can get it straight. I keep asking, but we run out of one or the other. I can say we ran out of time, but if I'm wrong, we ran out of tape. I guess it's going to come to the same conclusion. How are you people in tape land? And people here, I was going to throw in a little excursion for those of you who would like to. Just think off on your own along the lines of punishments, not just the classic ones, not all the 7 deadly sins and the nice obvious ones I mentioned of greed and lust, but think along the lines of me giving that possible retelling, reliming of what punishment truly is, and the myths at the ordinary level, the religious myths, of the punishment simply being you being served up eternally what you thought you wanted to eat temporarily, locally. Just think up your own of the things in life that people do not look at necessarily. Forget really some immediate weight of a religious idea or constriction on you, just things that you and other people seem at the time to go, wow, you know, I would like that. But what if, wow, I would like that, and you get it, and that force, whatever force was involved, could continue unabated, unrestrained, with that which is pleasurable and profitable left, with no restraints at all, would it always be so? And for you people at least, since the public's out of the room, I assume, consider that this might have, shall we say, even metaphorical, that is, from a more complex view, other reality and potential use right here. And you people out of town specifically, I served up a kind of, I put a note about a month ago here in Atlanta, and I said it was my holiday gift for some people around here, whether they particularly wanted the gift or not. And it did not get passed around. I want you people in the other cities getting this tape right now to be aware generally of what this sort of in-group, unsolicited gift. And it is quite simply that there are certain hobbies in life that, one in particular, and it has to do with nicotine, that the hobby, besides what is commonly known specifically as cutting down the oxygen that goes to the brain, we shouldn't be of any surprise to any of you people. But you remember MV12? There comes a time, people involved with this long and seriously enough, that it begins to have a telling negative effect on the production of MV12, which you, without whether you even know what it is. It runs a detrimental course against the production of MV12. What else do I have to tell you? And some of you it has gone too far. That is, there are some of you, even here, that are, I hate to pick on you, but some of you are overdue for your 8-year shock already. And I don't keep track, and I'm not interested in anybody's vices, and I'm not the Sturgeon General. Even though some of you know I have a very attractive carp outfit at home. But some things, some hobbies can be pursued, but up to a certain point. Some people can no longer do them. And that is my unsolicited, and perhaps with a few of you still left, immediately non-appreciated gift. But there it is, motherfuckers. Almost all of you that still may be involved in any hobby that is cutting down, I'm just giving you an easy way to look at it. Because as you know, I have not gone into even the appearance of any sort of scientific description of MV12 other than to assure you that there is a change that takes place in one's nervous system, including the blood, along some of the shocks that happen outside the normal progression of this. In other words, if you're doing this, there comes a time that you have got to have different kinds of internal fuel that can only be self-produced. It's not some nectar, it's not some ambrosia you can go find to eat. It happens within the body of life itself, that through your own kind of shocks, your whole system changes. Yes. Some of you know that for a fact, and I don't have to tell it, and the rest of you should hear the reality of it, even if you don't understand it.